guest. Sid Olney joins me from Manila via Skype. He's the country director for Save the Children in the Philippines. Sir, what is your assessment of the humanitarian situation following the storm?
Well, we're moving from a search and rescue phase right now into a recovery. Unfortunately, I think this storm took many of us by surprise. It was a below intensity storm in terms of wind and rainfall, and it hit particularly hard in an area that was unaccustomed to getting hit by storms. So what we've seen are hundreds of villages across hundreds of square kilometers that have had houses knocked down, rivers overflowing their banks, and damage and death to hundreds of families, but displacements of 150,000 people. So I think at this point in time, what we see is communities drying out right now and going back into their villages to assess the damage. So it's really much more recovery phase.
So Sid, what is the greatest need right now, and what would you say is the biggest challenge?
Well, I think the biggest challenge the government is looking at, well, really, how do we get aid into those hundreds of communities? How do we prioritize? I think right now what we're looking at, where the damage was the greatest, was in Zamboanga del Norte. You see a couple of villages where there's dozens of dead, and then in Lanao del Norte. So we've got the military using some of their logistical capacity to bring in water and food and supplies. And then I would say for Save the Children and other child-focused organizations, it's how do you limit the psychological stress on these children? School starts next Tuesday after the Christmas holidays. We want to make sure that they get back into their schools. So we're seeing dozens of schools that are damaged. We're focused on making sure that schools are ready for children come Tuesday.
So schools ready for children, but are these children, Ned, ready for going back to school, considering what they've been through?
Yeah, I mean, we've got as of yesterday, the numbers were 150,000 people displaced. We're probably moving in the next couple of days down to 10, 20,000 displaced. So yeah, what we see in my experience of humanitarian disasters around the world, as fast as you can get children back to a sense of normalcy, what their lives look status quo ante, then the more quickly they recover from the stress. So yeah, we would say as a humanitarian intervention, get kids back to school.
And Ned, you know, Philippines is certainly no stranger to deadly storms and typhoons. How do you feel this was different from all the previous ones that we've seen?
You know, the government is asking for an inquiry on this. I think there was a bit of complacency. From the early assessments, we've heard that across these little villages, the local governments warned villagers to evacuate, and they didn't. The majority of these villages that had the larger numbers of casualties, they didn't evacuate. And I think it's because they saw that this was a smaller storm. It wasn't even categorized as a typhoon. It was a tropical storm. They saw that the winds were quite low, that the rain levels were going to be low, and they didn't evacuate. And this was over the Christmas holidays. Most families were saying, we want to stay home with our families to be able to celebrate. And of course, you saw what happened in the aftermath. I think there's going to be a good assessment of this one. And I think we're going to learn some lessons, tragic lessons going forward.
All right, Ned Olney, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much.